Call the Public Utilities meeting to order.
It has never been. Oh, she's calling it to order.
It's on. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Tyus.
Present.
Alderwoman Green.
Present.
Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderwoman Rice.
Present.
Chairman Ingracia.
Present.
You have 4 present.
Thank you, and thanks for being here tonight, everybody. We're going to go in order. The Water Department is going to speak first, and then we'll do Q&A with the committee, and then Spire, and then we have Kent Flake with the Streets Department, who's going to go over a new policy Streets is working on with us. So, Kurt, you want to come up?
Yep. Good evening.
Evening.
I'm talking on behalf, as you know, of the Water Division. It's give you a little bit of background on the division. The city has owned the utilities since 1835. We have two treatment plants, one on Mississippi that's been portions of it since the 1880s, and then a second plant on the Missouri River in Chesterfield, the Howard Bend plant that's been in operation since 1929. We serve the city of St. Louis proper within its boundary. We wholesale water to some surrounding utilities and supplement water that they get from their own wells and production plants. We are responsible for the water mains in the street, the fire hydrants and the valves in the street. The homeowners actually own the service lines from the main in the street all the way into the foundation of their building. There is a service line program to help cover repairs in the public right-of-way of the residential services, and if they have an open paid-up account. I guess some of the things that we struggle with is finding enough employees to work for us, and which I think is typical of all the cities. We're no different than the other city departments. The water mains in the street, we have 1,200 miles of those. They're getting older, and that's something that we've been addressing over time. We would like to step that up more in the future. I think going forwards, every time we get a rate increase, we're going to have a bigger portion of the increase devoted to addressing some of the aging infrastructure. With that, I'm here for answering questions. I'm not sure what all you're interested in, but I'm here.
Alderwoman Green, do you have any questions? Alderwoman Tyus, I apologize.
That's all right. Take no offense. Mr. Scobie, how are you this evening?
Doing fine, thank you.
Good, good. Now, the Water Department is in a enterprise account, is that correct?
It is.
Okay, and it's one of 2, the other one would be in the airport with the city of St. Louis?
That's correct.
Okay, do you have any idea how much is in your enterprise account right now?
What, total?
Total amount of money, any kind of, it could be from last month or the month before, approximately.
It's, I would say it's probably around $30 million.
And it can only be used by the Water Department?
That's correct.
Okay. And what kind of things are the enterprise account? What's the use?
The use is for the operation of the utility. We, everything that we generate through our activities and the paying of the water bill is put into our accounts to be used for the utilities operation. It's a way to sustain the utility operation.
Okay, and where does your income source revenue come from?
It comes from the sale of water primarily to our customers. We do some work for through the course of business. If, like, for example, we've had in the past agreements with MoDOT to move water mains for activities that they're doing, and we get reimbursed for that. We have done that for others. We also charge fees for if somebody's tapping into our main for a new development. There's a cost with that.
Okay, so but your main income is from sale of water?
Yes.
And is that from, not just from the city residents, but you also sell water to other municipalities, is that correct?
Yes, the other utilities we do in the surrounding area.
Okay, so when you talk about tapping into your source, who would be doing that? Businesses or new homes, or what is it?
Any customers, if you have a property you're developing, you're building a building there, and you need water, you would pay for the cost for us to make a connection for you.
Okay, and are residential and business rates different?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Do you have some people that are on flat fee and some that are on metered?
That's correct. Most of our residential accounts are flat rate, and then all of our businesses and commercial, industrial connections are metered.
All your businesses? So like if you had a car wash, would that be metered?
Yes, it would be.
Is that required if you have a car wash or
Yes.
laundry facilities?
Yes.
Are there any that are grandfathered in if they, or everybody, if you have that business?
Yeah, if you have a business, you're expected to pay for the quantity of water that you're using. The flat rate is based upon like the number of rooms in a home, the number of toilets, showers, and the component aspect of it. And that is not set up for commercial operations.
And so what is your main expense?
Its main expense is personnel, then chemical, and then electrical.
Personnel, chemical, and that's for the water cleanup or treating the water?
What was the question again?
The main expense was personnel,
Yeah,
chemical, and what else?
electrical.
And what is chemical? Is that the treatment of the water?
Yes, yes, it is. We use various chemicals to treat the water.
And the electrical is, what is that for?
It's pumping the water, pumping it from the river into the plant, and then pumping it from the plant to the customer.
And how many facilities do you have?
We have 2 treatment facilities.
And they are where?
Chain of Rocks in North City on the Mississippi, and then the Howard Bend plant in Chesterfield on the Missouri River.
And so city workers who work out in Chesterfield, so I'm the chair of public employees now, so I've been kind of trying to figure this out. So I know if you go to the airport, they get some kind of expense for doing that. Do we also pay them an extra amount or expense for
Yeah,
working?
they get a commuting allowance, the same one that the airport employees get.
And what is that, the one in Chesterfield, is that where you say it was?
Yes.
And what is it called?
The Howard Bend treatment plant.
And how many employees are out there?
There's approximately 50.
And how many at the Chain of Rocks?
It's there's a little bit more. There's like 110.
Okay, and so how many total employees are with
We have 350 positions on our table of organization.
350?
Yes.
Okay, so water is very important to me because I never, ever want to be Flint, Michigan, okay?
Yes.
And you know, we had earlier, I carried the bill for the pay increase, and I was quite surprised because your employees showed up and did very good testimony, and was surprised about what some of them made when you consider how important they are to keeping this city running. And I did call you and speak to you about the fact that I thought they ought to make a lot more money because just way underpaid. I mean, especially, I did not know that these employees came and testified they couldn't do secondary sometime and things like that because they have to show up for fires and things. And these are the people who actually work underground when there's something that happens, right?
Yeah, it's we're a 24/7 operation, and there's certain positions where they need to be available
No
to
man.
work after hours and weekends.
No, man.
So there are some positions where it's not possible for them to have an outside second job.
We're going to have this conversation because I think that we ought to, if you cannot have a second job and other people can, I think we ought to be compensating them a lot more than people who can just have a second job, especially when you look at what they are making. So I don't have any further questions, Madam Chairwoman, at this time, but I just want to still bring up that I am working with the Personnel Director about having some people reclassified. I want to just let you know that because just do not make enough money for what they do.
Yeah, I would like to see them make more money.
Okay.
So we're not in conflict there.
All righty. I have no further questions.
Alderwoman Green?
Thank you for coming out this evening. You alluded earlier that you're short of employees or you have vacancies. About how many do you have?
I don't have the actual round number, but it's like 16 to 17% vacancy rate.
Okay. And what would you say are the main reasons that we're having a hard time attracting employees?
I hear there's always a number of reasons, but the two primary ones I hear is wages and residency
Okay.
are the reasons given.
Okay. Which is what the alderwoman from the first was kind of alluding to already.
If you give them enough money, residency don't become a problem.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Are there any challenges that you're seeing, especially around infrastructure upgrades in the city right now?
It's the biggest, something we're seeing, which a lot of utilities are seeing, is the aging out of their infrastructure, the pipes, the valves, the treatment facilities. These are very long-lasting investments, but the life cycle of these investments are coming to the end where the need to reinvest and renew these systems is much more. So the aging infrastructure is one of the bigger challenges. That will increase. You'll see that increase in the number of main breaks and failures of the system.
And what is the average lifespan of when you say that something's approaching the end of its lifespan? When we make these infrastructure improvements, if we are to replace things, how long can we expect for them to last before we need to replace them again?
It's pipe, they typically quote like 100 years life,
Okay.
but it's really, there's no, it's not like a piece of bread that there's an expiration date used by. So some water pipe can last maybe 150 or longer, and then some pipe is less than 100 years. It kind of depends on the conditions of the ground where you put it in, and then the quality of construction of the pipe. So, I mean, there's a lot of variables, but you kind of look at 100 years as the where you want to really be thinking hard about replacing it.
Okay. And just so I understand protocol, I know in the 15th Ward, we've had a number of water main breaks over the last couple of years, some that have been quite difficult. And thank you for your help on that. When there is a water main break, what is the protocol for replacement? Do we replace the whole line? Do we fix it? Kind of piecemeal it back together? What is the...
Well, it depends on what's going on. We're going to respond and do an immediate repair, which may be a clamp on the pipe, if that's what it takes, or it may be replacing a couple lengths of pipe, depending on what we see. We're not going to put a clamp on a pipe that we see pitted through corrosion on the outside and know that we're going to be back right away. We're going to dig back until we get fairly sound pipe and then replace the length that's involved with that. Other times you'll see a pipe sheared down across perpendicular to the pipe and is otherwise in good shape. We're going to put a clamp on that and then backfill and restore it.
And if you had to estimate what percentage of the current pipes or water system in the city do you think will need to be replaced in, let's say, the next maybe 10 years?
10 years? I would like to, maybe if I could, in an ideal world, we replace 100 miles of pipe.
Okay. What percentage of the cities? I have no idea how long pipe, how
would
much of the
be-
city that covers.
That would be about, area-wise, I couldn't tell you, but it's maybe around 10% of
Okay.
the pipe, a little bit less.
And if we were set up on a system where we were replacing 10% every 10 years, would that be enough to be able to maintain a quality infrastructure?
Yeah, I think so. It's, one of the things that we look at is when we identify what we want to do is the break history of the pipe. If we have a break in the same block every year, we know that this is a length that we need to replace. But if it's the first break in 10 years and the pipe looks good, we're not going to replace it even if it's 110 years old.
Okay.
And so we probably have about 10 miles of pipe that if we had the opportunity, we would like to replace.
Okay. And then when there is a water main break and you have to go in and replace it, what is the protocol for then replacing the street that's over it in a way that doesn't make it cave in after 3, 6, 9 months?
Yeah, it's well, you do the repair and then you backfill it with material to fill in the void. And that could be gravel, that could be flowable fill, which is a lightweight concrete. It just depends on the situation and sometimes the season too.
Okay. And then the streets department, if it is needed, then comes in and repaves the entire street? Or, so I know we've had a couple of things where it's filled in where it was dug out, but then it sinks over time, normally within a year or so. I'm just curious what we can do to stop that.
Well, if you, first of all, if you have a place that's happening, I would like to hear about it.
Okay.
Because we can take steps to minimize that settling of the backfill like that. And, but it does occur. That's kind of the nature of the beast. And we'll come back, or we ask the street department to come back and address it. So we work closely with the streets.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's all my questions for now.
Alderwoman Spencer?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thanks for being here today. I apologize I missed the beginning, but hopefully my questions are not redundant. While water is the only public utility that we have here in the city, water being a public utility is not unusual. Am I right?
That's correct.
It's my understanding that the vast majority of Americans get their water from a public water company. Is that right? The research I did in the last 7 minutes shows that 11% of Americans get water from a private company. That means 89% of us are getting water from a public water company, as opposed to a private investor-owned utility like all the other utility companies that are here today. Am I right?
Yeah, it's pretty much the case, yeah.
We've talked about privatizing our water here in the city of St. Louis, and I think that's just an important piece to keep in mind. How does our water rank nationally? Do you know off the top of, as of this year? I know we've been number 1 before, and that must fluctuate.
It does. Nationally, we haven't won a national award for taste. And since that one award that we gotten. We've won 2 years the best tasting water in the state of Missouri. And 1 year we lost. It's only through the Missouri section of the American Water Works Association. They started a taste contest of people's water, and we won the first 2 years. So
I have to agree with that contest. I mean, when you go somewhere else, it's really remarkable the difference in taste of water. What is it that makes St. Louis water taste so good?
well, it's actually, I think it's the source water. You go, you look at the muddy Mississippi and Missouri River, it doesn't look very appetizing, but it's a good source of water. There's a huge volume of water, so you don't have the buildup of, like in Florida, of the organics that might find in a swamp or something like that.
When we visited the water treatment facility, I think all of us here have visit it at some point or another. I was struck by the sort of filtration system being fairly organic in nature, going through layers of rock and other natural sort of ways of getting the sediment and other contaminants out. Is that unusual, or is that a fairly common practice?
It's very common. If you have a surface water like we do, source water, you will have it's rare that you don't have a filtration system similar to ours. There's variations of it, but that's usually the last stage.
We produce a lot of extra water, is that right, here in the city between the two plants, or at least some significant amount of additional water we sell to surrounding areas, am I right?
We do. I don't know the quantity off the top of my head, but I know budget-wise, we get about $3 million revenue through the sales to our surrounding utilities.
And the $3 million is out of a total revenue?
Of $50-some million, so.
And do we have capacity, do we currently have capacity to grow that amount in sales? In other words, can we produce even more water than we currently do with the current capacity that we have?
Absolutely, we do.
What would the growth, how much could we increase capacity without increasing infrastructure?
We could easily produce another 100 million gallons per day on average.
And we currently produce?
On average, we currently produce about 104 million gallons per day.
So we could almost double the output of water that we produce without?
Yes.
I think that puts us in a pretty good position as we consider global warming and other things will impact water availability across the country. So in other words, we're sort of poised to be able to capitalize on that if necessary.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's crazy to develop deserts and other areas for large populations that ecologically can't sustain it when you can live in St. Louis, buy our water.
Yeah. When we sell the water that we do sell to surrounding areas, are we charging a rate similar to what we charge St. Louis residents? I'm sure they get a bulk discount and that sort of thing, but is there room to improve the rate by which we sell water to other water companies?
It's actually a pretty good deal for us. It is, their rates are adjusted every year by contract based upon our audited costs. And so if our costs go up, so does their rate. And it's, the actual cost plus 18% for overhead and profit.
Okay.
So it's pretty good.
I mean, one of the reasons I'm asking too, the surrounding area is served by Missouri American Water, which is a private company, and it's not a municipal company, and therefore they're able to enjoy profits off of the water that's sold, whereas as being an enterprise fund here, we are not able to enjoy, or we don't have any profit built into our pricing system. All the money that we charge goes back into the water department. So it's just a different model, and it's just good to be aware of how that kind of pricing works. The amount that we charge households, do we have the average of what a St. Louis household pays?
It's approximately $70 per quarter.
So per month, that would look somewhere around $23 or something like that a month. Do we know how that fits in nationally?
I would have to look on a national survey, but it's well below what is being charged in St. Louis County and regionally. It's on the lower end of things.
Would you be able to provide some sort of report to us looking at how we fit in nationally, regionally, and that sort of thing?
Sure.
I think
I'd be happy to do that.
I think that would be very helpful, especially for our residents that, as utilities go up, just looking at how our water compares across the country would be remarkable, but even within the region where we have similar sources of water, similar water treatment, of course, we would expect the price of water to be much lower than in, say, in Nevada or in a desert or something like that, but I think it's would be impressive to look at us compared to the surrounding areas. One of the other unusual aspects of our water company, not only being especially delicious, is that we as a water company don't, generally speaking, meter our customers. It's my understanding that our water company is the largest company in the United States, maybe, that doesn't meter. Is that right? This is anecdotal from utility experts I know, but that we're fairly unusual in our unmetering.
We're unusual. I don't know if we are the largest. We may be, maybe not. I know that there's others are out there that even in California, I was surprised to see that they have flat rates in some of the communities.
Would you see any benefit to putting meters in? I know they have a significant cost associated with each household. And given the fact that we have a lot of capacity to overproduce, but we may not in the future, and it may be nearer than we think, given, global warming. Is there a good reason to start metering, to deploy meters throughout the city?
There's pluses and minuses with everything, and the biggest benefit is that I see is able to track where all of our water that we produce goes, and by having meters, we would have a better idea of where all of it goes.
Okay. We were touching on this earlier, the infrastructure being somewhat aged. I noticed a lot of the water sort of input pipes are missing their lids and can be, kind of dangerous in front yards and things like that. And of course, we have aged pipes, I suppose, under the ground. Am I right?
We have,
the water pipes?
our pipes are on a whole older, but as I was explaining earlier, it's not necessarily expiration date on the pipe, but over time you'll see more and more breaks each year and more failures as the pipe ages.
Do we have a significant need to upgrade our infrastructure?
Yes.
Do we have a cost associated with that? Do we have that sort of itemed out, prioritized, looking across the city?
Yeah, we probably identified about $350 million worth of capital improvements that we would like to do over time.
Do we submit that as part of the budget? One of the things that's really missing in the budgetary process is what we actually need, not just in the water department, all of our departments. For example, I think many of us were blindsided by the fact that our refuse trucks were so old and we had such a great need that we were unaware of coming into this fiscal year. Do you submit that as part of your budgetary request, or a long view plan, or an annual capital improvement? I guess you don't. I guess being an enterprise fund, it's a bit different, so your budget doesn't go in the same way. So I'm kind of thinking through this as we're talking. Maybe that's not the most appropriate. Do we have income set, a plan to be able to replace that, or is that something we're going to have to raise rates to be able to accommodate?
It will be raising rates. It's each rate increase moving forward over time, you'll see a bigger component of that to address aging infrastructure. And that's typically when we talk about our infrastructure historically, is when we have rate increase, how we're going to use the money, and explain the need and where it's going to go. Typically, it's not during a budgetary process.
Okay. Hopeful that we can coordinate with other utilities when we rip up the streets. One of the things that I think we're here today to discuss is sort of the lack of coordination between utility companies, the street department. When you rip up a street, you might as well get them all done if you can. Otherwise, you're just ripping them up again. Does the water department pay the same cost to the street department as far as permitting goes to dig into the street?
We don't pay the permitting costs, but we do pay them for the restoration that they do, the work that they actually perform.
So do other utilities pay that permitting cost? Do we know?
I can't answer that.
I think we'll address that with Kent Flake from Streets is here.
Okay. They do pay? Is the water department, okay. If the water department is the only utility that doesn't, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but perhaps we should I don't know. I mean, I'm happy, I think we're probably, I would prefer that, you know, the water customers pay appropriately to adjust the streets, just because the streets can use some help in the city, to put it lightly. I don't know how to word it without offending everyone in the room.
Well, we do
but
pay for their actual costs of
To
doing the
repair it,
work,
yeah, okay.
And Ken is not bashful about talking about that.
Okay,
So
good.
we have a
Okay.
good relationship.
Okay, that's very good, very good. Okay. That pretty much does it for me. I thank you for your time and for the great water we all drink.
Thank you.
Alderman Ogilvy?
Hey, thank you. Sorry to come in late. I had to challenge parking when I arrived. I just wanted to ask if do you guys maintain a rate comparison or a list of rates for other public water utilities?
We look at it from time to time, and I will be providing a request to provide it to you guys.
If we could see that, and I've seen it in the past, but also a history of our local rates and when rates changed. We do that by ordinance, and we do it not very often. And my personal opinion is it would be wise of us to build in smaller increases every couple of years rather than wait so long and then hit people with a larger increase. But maybe to start that conversation, just showing everybody the past rate structure would be helpful. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Alderman Mohammed?
Hey, Commissioner, how are you?
Doing fine. Yourself?
I'm all right. Excuse my tardiness. I was riding with Scott, that's why I'm late. I have no questions, Madam Chairwoman.
Okay, that's everybody. Thanks for,
Thank you.
no. Alderwoman Rice, who's literally sitting right next to me.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. My question is just about reporting and how well the water department is integrated into the Citizen Service Bureau and how those tickets kind of get to you. So some of our other city departments that are under the cities and not separate utility are integrated into that system. Is the water division directly tied in there? Are you communicating well with the Citizen Service Bureau?
They forward their water-related citizens' requests to us, I think in a pretty timely manner.
Okay.
And then we get them, and then we have somebody on our staff that receives them as part of the responsibility to go through there and get responses to them.
Okay. I had someone approach me and said that there was a new system coming online with the water division, that you guys were transitioning to a new way of tracking those tickets and those kinds of requests. Is that accurate, or is that?
It's we're doing asset management using CityWorks, which is the same software that those reports are, and we're upgrading that, and that might be something that they're referring to. The idea is to capture our costs electronically, so that instead of, if we want to know the average cost of some activity, we can just go to electronically pull it up and find the average, instead of sending somebody to a paper file cabinet and shuffling papers in.
Sure. Okay. So a little more modernizing, a little more digitizing.
Yeah, and
records.
that kind of sounds like maybe what they were talking about.
Okay.
But-
Okay.
So,
All right. So any concerns that you feel like you have with reporting back and communicating back with the Citizen Service Bureau, that you feel like customers' complaints are getting addressed adequately through that process, or is it still a situation where folks should call the water division directly with questions?
it's more, if they call us directly, we get it sooner.
Okay.
And, but the Citizen Service Bureau process works.
Okay.
I mean, it's like most processes, it goes in cycles, where we could do better, and other times it's going well.
Okay. All right. And just, there were a lot of great questions asked, and thank you for being here and for answering them all.
My pleasure.
Do a couple follow-ups. I heard you say that you do pay the permitting cost, or you do not pay the permitting cost?
We do not pay the permitting cost.
Do you apply for a permit?
No, we do not.
Okay, so how do streets know, because this is the thing that I've had sometime when people have dug up, how do streets know that you're digging up the streets? Because I've called the street department sometime, and they're like, well, we don't know who that is because they didn't notify us. Do you do some kind of notice?
Yes, we will notify the streets department when we're digging and working in the street.
Okay, and is that some formal procedure?
It's a, what do you mean by formal? I mean,
Is it
we have a
written?
process.
Do you just call somebody? Is there something, you know?
Yeah, there is formalized where we call them and give them notice that we're doing something there.
But you don't have to get a permit from them to actually dig the street up?
That's correct.
Okay. And so I've been here when you made the big change, because now you charge by bathrooms, and
Yeah.
you didn't used to do that when I first got here. And
Oh,
that-
okay.
So I look at my bill from when I've been in my house 32 years, so and I'm only 29, but I look at the difference in my bill, and I always tell you, the amount of bathrooms have nothing to do with the water you use, does it? Because if it's only 2 people and I got 6 bathrooms, I still don't use any more water than if I had 1 bathroom.
That's correct.
So do you know who came up with that idea?
What, with flat rate?
No, start charging by the bathrooms.
That was, I was
That was
here.
before you.
I was here, but not in this position.
Byzantiner, I think, maybe.
Yeah.
And the reason we haven't gone to a flat rate is people did not want to pay for the cost of the meters. The city specifically did not want the cost. We have encouraged citizens to do it, but we ourselves don't want to bear that cost. Is that right?
Yeah, it would be a substantial cost, and there's issues involved with it. It's its own conversation.
Right. Okay. That's all the questions I had. Thank you.
What would the average cost of adding meters to a residence be?
It would be, I think, around 2,000, give or take. Per connection. And there's 79,000 flat rate accounts.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Todd, Fagan, do you want to kick things off for Spire?
Thank you. My name is Todd Fagan. I am the right-of-way manager, excuse me, for Spire. Here to talk about our rates, our ongoing infrastructure upgrade, energy assistance programs, paving, permitting, I have a bunch of experts here to handle any of your questions. We have our VP of Operations, Tim Goodson, here to talk about our ongoing infrastructure upgrade. We start off with him, if you're okay with that?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
There we go. I'm Tim Goodson, Vice President of Operations for Spire. Thanks for having us over to talk with you tonight, explain a little bit about our company and the gas business that we have carried on here in St. Louis for over 160 years. We are organized as a regulated and unregulated company. The regulated piece is what you normally know as a gas company in a city. That regulation is governed by a couple of laws, but principally is through the Missouri Public Service Commission. To have an expert here with our group who will talk about that aspect of things, answer your questions much better than I can. Here in the St. Louis metropolitan area, we operate our headquarters office just down the street. We have about 1,700 employees who work in the eastern Missouri area. In addition to that, we operate utilities in Kansas City, in the state of Alabama, including in Mobile, Alabama, and also in southeastern Mississippi. That is our principal business, local gas distribution company, so the regulated side. The unregulated side features gas marketing, also gas storage. We also have some other related businesses that are associated with the company. Those are not completely unregulated. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, for example, does oversee some of those businesses. From the standpoint of our structure, our CEO, Suzanne Sitherwood, is here in St. Louis. We have our operating groups, our engineering groups, our customer service people, legal, other functions you might expect of any corporation. We have a leadership council that our CEO chairs. That group oversees all of the business units that make up the company. And from that standpoint, we run the company with all the employees in the various departments. We do employ what is known as a shared service model, in that we look to create as much efficiency with common functions like human resources or legal by having a single department that is shared across all of our utilities. So I'm going to turn now to some of the more meaty information and call on Scott Weitzel, who is with us from a rates and regulatory perspective. He can talk about the rate-making process and answer your questions in those areas, and I'll be happy to come back and answer questions later for you as well about the company in general.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Scott Weitzel, and I'm in the regulatory group. And my main interaction is working with the Missouri Public Service Commission, who oversees Spire Missouri, Inc. That's kind of your guys' interest with the gas utility. So they have about 5 commissioners in Jeff City. They have a staff of lawyers, accountants, auditors, engineers, tariff and rate design personnel that kind of oversee our rates and some of our infrastructure build out. We recently went through a rate case with them, and that ended in April of 2018. And we were actually able to pass about a 3% decrease to customers in the St. Louis area through that, which is about $2 a month. And something interesting with natural gas prices being pretty low, that our rates today are about 22% cheaper than they were 10 years ago, which is about $19 a month if you looked at rates 10 years ago. Do you guys have any questions for me? Rates, Missouri Public Service Commission?
I guess what we'll do, if you have folks who want to come up and speak on specific points, we can have everyone come up and then do Q&A.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
We'd like to bring up Julie Traxel to talk about our Energy Assistant Program.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Julie Troxel, and this is Connie Sanchez. Is it okay if we're both up here? Yeah. Okay. We work in the Community Services Department, so what we do is handle any complaints that go to the Better Business Bureau, the Missouri Public Service Commission. We answer any of those complaints and work with those customers. And then we also work with our energy assistance for all of our customers. So we help all of our low-income customers find funding, and we help explain all of our programs to the community. A couple of our programs that we have is the cold weather rule, which a lot of customers have heard about. That is our most lenient payment arrangement. It allows customers to restore their services by not paying the full balance all at once, and then we spread that remaining balance over a 12-month budget for them, so it allows them to budget each month. And we have budget billing. A lot of customers take advantage of the budget billing. And then we also have a lot of programs for our low-income customers. One of the new programs this year is, it's called our low-income program. It was passed with our tariff. It allows customers to get signed up for this budget program, and we give them a credit. As long as they pay their monthly bill, we give them a credit each month. And if they pay towards their arrearage, we will also match that payment. So what we're trying to do is help customers be able to keep their services on all year long and to maintain their gas through a smaller budget amount, something that is more affordable for them. Connie's going to talk about some of our other programs that we have for our low-income customers.
So one of the programs that we have is our extended payment date program. So this program is for anyone that gets Social Security or SSI. What it does, it gives them a longer time so that they don't have to pay late fees. So the typical customer has 7 days between the due date before late fees are assessed. Under this program, they would have 14 days before late fees are assessed. So the reason being, if their Social Security or SSI is coming at one time of the month and their Spire bill is coming at another, it would hopefully prevent them from keep having to pay late fees each month if they're coming at different times. The other program that we have is our registered customer program. So this program is for anyone 65 or older or disabled. So what it does, it gives them extra protection during the months of November through March. to make sure that their services aren't disconnected for non-payment. So with this application, they would have to fill it out each year to renew with us as a registered customer. And they have the option to include third-party contact information so that we, if we needed to, we could contact that third party, let them know what's going on with the account and see if that person could assist in some way. So they would still get their disconnection so that they could use that to apply for assistance, but we would cancel that before going out since they're on a vulnerable population. We want to make sure that their services are staying on during the cold weather months. The other program that we have is our medical emergency certification. So if someone in the home is experiencing a medical crisis and they're in threat of disconnection, they can have their doctor fill out a form, fax it to our office, and we immediately cancel the disconnection. We also look to see if they've received energy assistance within the past year, and if they have, we contact that community action agency. So in the city of St. Louis, that would be the Urban League, to see if they have LIHEAP assistance that they can use to help that person so that they're not in that same boat the following month. We also have a red tag furnace repair program. So that is for anyone living at or below 185% of federal poverty level. So for example, for one person, that would be about $1,872 a month. So with that program, they get up to $1,000 in assistance. So it's up to $700 for furnace repairs, and then it's up to $450 for piping or other gas appliance repairs. So typically the other gas appliance is a hot water heater that's preventing them from being able to operate their furnace. So we would go out, fix that appliance so that they can operate the furnace. So we Spire technicians can either complete those repairs or the person can select a contractor that's insured that could also complete. That program is for homeowners or renters. The other program that we have is our Dollar Help. So with that program, it's for individuals living at or below 135% of federal poverty level. So those are the same income limits as LIHEAP energy assistance. And with that program, they utilize the LIHEAP funds, and then we can supplement with Dollar Help. So they get up to $300 unless they meet the crisis household guidelines, then they can actually receive up to $700. So if there's like a terminal illness in the home or someone's on dialysis, there's someone 60 or older in the home or children 5 and under, they can actually get up to the $700 if they need it. So we, as Julie said, we've been doing a lot of outreach events. So since October of this year, we've done 16 events in the city of St. Louis. So we go out to dialysis centers, senior apartment buildings. We help people fill out their LIHEAP energy assistance application, and then we also sign them up for any Spire programs that they may qualify for. We work really closely with the community action agencies. I actually came from the Urban League as the LIHEAP director for 6.5 years before coming to Spire, so we have a really good relationship with them. So last winter we did 39 events in the city of St. Louis. So I anticipate we will do at least that same amount, if not more, this winter.
It's nice to meet you in person. Thanks so much for your help at Clinton Peabody.
Yes, thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Rob Atkinson. I'm the director of our construction engineering at Spire. And my group does all of the construction design and cost estimating for our capital construction projects at Spire. And as Tim mentioned, we have groups across the state of Missouri, both east and west, Alabama and Mississippi. So we have teams of engineers and analysts that do those designs. For the Missouri East area, and specifically the city of St. Louis, we do the design work for new main extensions for new customers, main relocations for public improvement projects, like road projects, main reinforcements for capacity increases for our system. But the main area that our company is really working right now is the infrastructure replacement of our older parts of our system. And most of that is within the city of St. Louis in our cast iron. Our cast iron system is, we've got roughly 800 miles of cast iron pipe still left in our system. The majority of that is within the city of St. Louis. Some of that pipe is, 100 plus years old, and we are actively replacing it. We are doing the majority of the work right here in the city, and we are using our infrastructure system replacement surcharge that is approved through the Missouri Public Service Commission that has allowed us to ramp up our replacement of our cast iron. We have kind of two replacement programs. We have a mandated program that is based upon, it's smaller sections that are based upon leaks and breaks of the current cast iron system. And then we have the larger strategic replacement, which is what we're really ramping up with the ISRIS program. Those are larger areas that are built on a risk model system. And in the last couple of years, we've been doing roughly 60 to 70 miles of cast iron replacement per year. And with that, I'm here to take any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure.
Yeah, come on up.
Once again, I'm Todd Fagan with the Right-of-Way Department for Spire. I just want to, talking about the permitting process, we do permitting for all of our work. We do this through the city website for all the jobs we do. Our goal is to try to apply for these jobs 21 days in advance of when we're going to schedule that work. Try to give as much notice as we can. We do send construction plans in for the larger projects, for maybe not for a leak or small service, but we give them a description of what work we are going to be doing. With Rob was talking about the replacement program, we meet with the city every year, try to give them a 3-year forecast of what is coming up ahead for this upcoming year. Try to give them with a map showing what has been completed in the different wards so they can better coordinate their projects and street maintenance work. We try to get Kent's paving list for what they come in so we can build that into our GIS layer in our mapping system so we see that throughout. Our designers can have an idea of what work's coming up. We have linked our mapping system with the street department's permitting system. So this allows us the visibility anytime there's going to be a parade, a walk, a run, an event that is closing down a city street. We have access, we have those polygons. We look for the conflicts with our work and the upcoming events. And that's kind of an automated process. Once the event is gone, it disappears, and then we schedule our work. We've tried to work around in the Dogtown area where we pull our crews out for St. Patrick's Day. We pull our crews out of Soulard for the Mardi Gras for that month or 6 weeks. We try to get our work done, coordinate them. We work with Mardi Gras Inc. to let them know what's going on with Tim Larson and his group. To try to, and with Kent, to make sure that we're getting out enough time for them to come in and do their paving work following us. So we work very closely with them for the scheduling to try to make sure they know what work we're doing and we know when we're trying to get out of their way for them. Our paving, we work with the street department. We do the concrete bases on certain roads. We bring them, leave them down for an asphalt overlay to top that off, and we send that to the street department for them to schedule that work. And then on some of the higher traffic areas, per the commissioner's request, we'll bring that up to grade so that we don't have a depression, or if it's cold this time of the year, asphalt is hard to get, so we'll go ahead and at their direction, we'll go ahead and bring that up to grade so we don't have any traffic issues or paving issues on that. So that's
Yep.
it. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Alderwoman Tyus?
Well, I'll start with Mr. Fagan, since, so in your construction, is under your purview also, when they come to change out meters and things like that, is that you or is that someone else?
That would be somebody else.
Who is that person with you here?
For like moving a meter or just?
Okay, so like in my community, they came up on a very historic street and they removed many meters at the house and then put these ugly big things right in front of the house.
Okay.
And several people objected, because I wouldn't have let you do it. You would have got off of my property, okay? And so I want to know who thinks that's a good idea to come and do that, and they didn't tell anybody. So half of them are still there. Half of the people wouldn't let them do it, and then they put them on the side. And do you have a rule about where your meters are supposed to go?
I can handle it, Tim, you want to handle it?
The nature of what's driving this is, as we are reconstructing the gas system and raising pressures, is that we're going from inches of pressure to pounds now in the city. Most of our pipe that will be serving residences and businesses will be at about 30 pounds maximum operating pressure. We've worked with the Missouri Public Service Commission safety staff, with our engineering staff, and following the standards that govern the gas industry around the country. In modernizing the system, moving meters outside is the safest practice. That's what's driving the moving of the meter. So we're replacing the main, the service run to the house, and bringing the meter and putting a regulator for the first time on most of these low-pressure systems. So those are the main components. That's what's driving it. I think when this first started, we had not given as clear a direction as could be put in place for how do you decide where a meter goes. Everyone understood the codes, the standards, the placement restrictions, the number of feet of pipe to maintain good service, et cetera. But in dealing with homeowners and in dealing with other parameters that influence this, that had not been made as clear. So I've made it clear that the last place we want to put a meter is in the front of a business or a residence. In some areas, so I'll give you an example, on Manchester, in the area near Vandeventer, buildings are one right after the other, common sidewalk, very close alley, too much traffic, very little limited room on the sidewalk in front. Those are mostly commercial premises. There we have set up a special arrangement with a different kind of regulator approach and piping. We have left the meter inside because they're generally not occupied as a residence would be all the time. People are there. If there were a leak, they could tell us very quickly. We could respond. So as a safety measure, those are the few where we're still allowing them to be left in. From an exterior standpoint, we have had residences and premise owners where there are people leasing. The owners who are renting to them have said, we want it here. We have tried to meet that whenever we can. We've had neighbors conflict about, I want it there, you want it here, I want them in the same place, don't block my gangway. So we try to work with each and every group, and I think the nature of, I would tell you now, my premise for this is, if a meter is to be placed in front of a business or a house, the director or one of the managers in each of the two regions that we operate will go and consult with the owner and with the premise occupant to say, where can we do this? If there's some that are objectionable, we're happy to come back and look at them and work with you and move them to a more appropriate location. Okay. We do this first on safety, second on many other parameters that come into play, while also meeting those national standards and code requirements. I've got Brian Parmentier, my regional director from the South Side. He can tell you in detail about how some of these have worked, even better than I can. Next question.
You don't have to get into detail. I just want to know if you had a rule, because my second question is, when I came here, we had a contact for Laclede Gas at that time, for the board. So you had somebody who came here, and so we knew who to call and to get that. We don't seem to have that anymore, and I wanted to know who the contact was for the Board of Aldermen.
Well, I think we,
and if you don't, you should set one up.
Yep. Well, we've always relied on Todd to be one of the point people for us.
You had a person here. Okay, Vince, I want to I have to go back, but I have the card still, so you had
I got number 2 sitting back here as well. Emily Romines in our Government Affairs group
Okay.
is now going to be playing a larger role with Alderman and the Mayor's office and others from a governmental affairs standpoint. So yes, we're going to continue to maintain Todd as a well-known established group, particularly with city departments, where we try to coordinate and work together, as well as have Emily. I'm happy to give you my number as well if you want to call me.
And I want to, Vince Talley, I can't, it's at the back, I should have brought the
Vince,
card.
yeah, is retired now, and
Yeah, see
I'm
there,
sure
that's
he,
how, so that tells you how long ago I first
Yeah.
came here, okay?
Understood.
So, but we had our own lobbyist or contact person, and it helps a lot when you want to resolve problems.
Sure.
So I want to just go back a little bit about what you said about meters, because so I still have an inside meter at my house. I have an old house, 100 years old. But then we paid to put the little square boxes that you had, where people could just drive by and read, and then all of a sudden they said that wasn't any good anymore, so as you update, I guess you go to different technology, and so now is your end goal to have all the meters back outside? Well, mine never was outside, because all the older houses, they were inside in the basement. We actually have
Yes.
something up under the porch, just like a root cellar, right?
it's one of our key goals and metrics from a safety standpoint to move meters outside whenever possible.
Okay.
There are a lot of factors that play into that, but yeah, that's the way we're going.
And so, if at all possible, if residents want it, you could put it on the side, shared gangway.
We always look to find a place, if the gangway's wide enough and there are no other vents, openings, windows, et cetera, that from a code standpoint wouldn't let us. In the rear, if there are common areas in the back of multi-family units where they
Right.
may be in sort of a U shape,
Right.
we're going to work and look at that. Our technology today allows us to put the service line by directionally boring almost anywhere and without damaging infrastructure on the surface. We can work with potholes the size of this lectern, if you will, and our people are very talented at getting that done.
And then I wanted some, let's see, Julie and Connie were in public relations, and they talked about the different programs. I wanted to know how they advertise the program. Are they on website? Is there something you could send as a link so that we as alder people, because we're always getting questions about things like that. Is there some kind of link that I could make?
Julie?
Because I usually make out forms to pass out to people at meetings and things.
Yeah, we have it on our Spire website. I believe it's under community or customer assistance programs, I think, if you would go to the Spire website. And then we also have flyers that we make up for different events that we attend. So we could always give you some generic flyers that we have. We can email them to you, bring them, make copies, bring them to you however you want them.
Just email. That's
Okay,
all
yeah,
right.
we can do that.
And how do you said that you also go out to different things from the Urban League to dialysis? And how are these events planned? How would, if I wanted you to come to an event, how would I go about having that happen?
Connie is our point person, or Todd, but you could email Connie and she'll schedule something with you. We'll make up the flyers, we'll have all the materials ready. You know, she likes to meet, just have a phone call with whoever's going to organize it, just to make sure we're on the same page, and then we'll contact whatever agency in that area, so Urban League, and then we'll coordinate with Urban League to let them know, hey, we're going to go to this event. You might start getting some applications, you know, from these customers, and so we can give you Connie's information. And
So if you had like a neighborhood fair, like say in the summer,
we attend
you could
those.
have a booth or something like that?
Yep, we attend those as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are you, I guess you guys are going to be here so I can get that information later.
Yes, yeah.
Right. And then I had a question about, did they say we have 800 feet of cast iron pipe, or was it more than that? 800 miles. I thought that 800 feet, I was like, wow. Why is that a problem, okay? Okay, and is that, whoever can answer this, is that mostly on private property or public property or a combination thereof? Do you ever go on private property to replace that, or does the customer have to do that?
Well, as you may be aware, Spire is a company that's been around for long. We have our tariffs and rights-of-way and other means of entering property where our pipes run with the city and with private property holders. So it really depends on the situation, so yes to both. The nature of most of the cast iron pipe, and I'll address the city core first. By that I mean from 6440 to Washington and from the river to about 18th or 20th Street. We have replaced that cast iron. So as the city goes forward with its plans for a widespread paving moratorium or for improvements here downtown, I have one job that remains, that we're waiting for some telecommunication and electrical work to be completed, and we'll do that job, which is not related to cast iron replacement, and then we will have completed the city. At that point, we would not believe we need to come back unless there was a third-party damage creating
Will
an
it have
emergency.
completed the city entirely?
City core.
Okay.
Yep.
And
So
wait
from
a minute.
Washington to 6440, River to about 18th Street.
Okay, so do you have a plan of where you're going? So as I make my plans about where I'm going to pave streets, if I know I'm going to demolish houses, I don't pave streets because that irritates me that then you have to come and get rid of the taps, okay? So do you have a plan that you can share with us about where you're going next? Because when you say city core,
Sure,
most of
yep.
us represent something that is not the
Right,
city
not
core.
in the downtown area.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
We do. We're in many neighborhoods now working, and that's driven, and Rob will give you more information about it, but by our safety plans, which one is known as a distribution integrity management plans. It's a safety-driven, risk-based plan that informs us about the age of pipes, condition, many factors that go into figuring out, okay, where should we work first? What makes sense? The other piece of that is keeping the system reliable. That means when it's cold at your house and you turn the furnace on or want a hot shower, that the gas is there to do its job. So it's reliability of pressure and flow. But you want to add to that?
Yeah, I do. First of all, I wanted to address your question about private property and is it the customer's responsibility for the replacement. The Spire owns the mains, the service lines up to the meter, and all of that part of it is our responsibility to maintain and to replace. As far as our plan, I think Todd mentioned, our strategic cast iron replacement plan, we've got a very long-range plan for that, but we build it into 3-year plans, a rolling 3-year plan. So every year we update that plan, and we do share that with the city, especially with the streets department and those folks that we work with on a daily basis. So we do have a long-range plan of the areas that we're going to be working.
So in your long-range plan, let's just say Old North St. Louis, which is an older part of St. Louis.
Yeah.
So if you were working over there, you would be working at all of Old North St. Louis at trying to get that done before you move to a new area? Is that how you would do it?
Not all of it. The areas are defined by the regulator stations that serve those areas, and there's multiple reg stations that serve the old north side, the south side, the west side. So we'll work in those areas, but we try to work strategically across there to complete all of the work in those areas. But it takes more than 1 year to be able to complete an area.
But so then you've been in the core area, as you call it, for several years, I take it then.
Well, the core area didn't have as much cast iron in it. It already had higher pressure main in it, but we have gone ahead and replaced what cast iron was left in the core area.
And how
The
did you
majority
make
of the
that
cast iron
determination?
I'm sorry?
How did you make that determination that that was where you would start?
Well, it actually wasn't where we started. It just happened to be one of the higher areas on our modeling for the replacement. So it ended up being one of the first areas. But actually, Baden Walnut Park was the first area we worked in, and down just on the south side.
Crondelet?
Yeah, the Crondelet area, yes.
Okay, older. So, okay, and I don't know if you're probably not going to be able to answer this. So I heard about all the programs. One of the things that I really have a problem with what you do is that people we have a cold weather rule. I really hate it when you then tell people that they have to pay this exorbitant deposit right before you, and then they can't do it, and then you turn the gas off. I think that is horrible. I don't know how I can express how angry I am with your company when it does that, because you're doing that to people and you're going around the whole point of the rule. And I am talking to every state rep, every state senator. I just sent some new ones up there about stopping you from doing that. I think that's disgusting. I wanted you to know, okay? So these people are barely able to pay their bills, and then you tell them, okay, you haven't been doing the good, so now you got to pay $700 for a deposit that they do not have, and I'm just making up a number. And so you're really going around the whole basis of the rule about cold weather when you do things like that. And I don't know who to talk to, but you really ought to stop it, because I'm about ready to introduce a resolution. And I did this years ago when you used to have these things about rate increasing. You used to not have them in St. Louis. And I shamed Laclede Gas into having them. They would never have the hearings here, and then they start doing it. And I think that is ridiculous what you do, and whoever does that ought to be ashamed of themselves.
I can address a little bit about the cold weather rule and the disconnections. So the deposit is charged. The customer, once they get to a certain level that they're behind on their payment, they're up for disconnection if they haven't paid their bill. And so we send them 2 notices. We send them the initial letter, then we send them the final letter, and then we make 2 phone calls to them as well. And then when the tech goes out to to turn their services off, they have to knock, let them know that they're there to turn their services off. The deposit is assessed. It's an advance deposit after they've been shut off. In order to get services restored again, we charge the advance deposit of $150.
No, you have done it for people who maybe you set up an agreement with them and they're trying to catch up because you just sometimes cannot, okay? And then you send them a thing saying, well, okay, we're going to charge you X amount. They can't do it. If they're trying to catch up their bills, they absolutely cannot do a deposit. And I'm an attorney, and I'm going to say again, you are absolutely going around the whole point of the rule, which is that people are people, and we ought to have heat in the cold weather. And I just think that is a bad policy that I'm going to start having my community tell me, and then I'm going to get up on the floor every day and speak to you. This is what they're doing. I think it's terrible.
Yeah, I think what it is, so the deposit isn't assessed until after they're off. That's when we charge the deposit, the advance deposit. But I think what happened, yes, I am.
So if I come with a difference, then we'll talk about that.
I think maybe what you're referring to is, so we put these customers on a cold weather rule payment arrangement.
Correct.
And if they don't pay, after 2 months, it breaks the cold weather rule, and then all of it is due.
Make exact payments, but if they're still trying to pay and they don't have any other money, but they're still trying to pay, you're cutting them off and telling them they're going to have to do a deposit if you don't have enough money.
Yeah, I think what it is it's their full amount due at that point because they broke that. Correct.
And
so that's why
you turn them off.
Correct. So
no, what you first do is tell them you got to pay this big
their balance,
deposit, and you can't pay a deposit if you can't pay the bill.
Yeah, so that's where my team is with the new low-income program, where we're really working with the customers that are getting EA, and we're auto-enrolling them into this program where they can get that $50 in the winter, a $50 credit, and then we're going to match any arrears. So we're hoping that a lot of these vulnerable customers, they won't break this cold weather rule plan.
So I'm a landlord, and so when I tell you this, I tell you I have to deal with this all the time with my rent, okay, long time. But at the end of the day, if they're struggling along and they are making the best, I don't say, okay, I'm going to put you out in the cold weather, okay? I don't have a cold weather rule. I actually can, okay? I don't do that because if you're doing the best you can and I don't think you're playing with me, it doesn't help for me to say, well, now you got to pay this more. Because you already know if they can't pay it, they can't do it. So my point to you is you are not living up to the letter of what the law is all about. And I'm hoping that they become stricter on you. I know you got way more lobbyists than me, but I've been talking to everybody I can because I just find that disgusting. And whoever thought of that and thinks that's cute, it's not. And I'm not going to argue with you. It's just not cute, okay? And it's not right to people who are struggling day to day. I have no other further questions.
Okay. Alderwoman Green?
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. First, I was trying to take notes on all the different programs for assistance. Would it be possible to get a handout or spreadsheet or something sent to us that details each program and what you have to do to qualify for each one, and if you are eligible to access multiple programs? I think that would be very helpful to be able to get to our constituents, as I don't think they always know what they're eligible to access.
So we brought some handouts for everybody today, but we can also email everything that's in here. We can email you, so that way you have it. And again, too, if you want anything printed off to keep at your offices, we can bring that as well.
That's great. And Connie and Todd have my email address, so
Okay.
if you get it to me, I'll make sure the committee gets it.
Okay, perfect.
We had nine on the committee, so at least.
And then the one other question I have, and maybe this will end up for Kent more than anybody, but my biggest frustration is streets and getting torn up from replacement of gas lines and then filling it in with concrete that then sinks and just makes the roads look horrible. And so I would like to know what the plan is, and I would also echo, it would be very helpful for us in planning to know when streets are going to be torn up and what that is, because I'm trying to do a lot of infrastructure improvements in my ward right now. And if I pave a street and then 6 months, a year later, it gets torn up, my residents their hair's on fire. Overseeing that. So I can't plan when I don't always have all of the information. And so I think the thing that I would just request is some kind of either monthly report to us of this is where we're going to be working the next month, or these are the wards or the streets or whatever that are going to be impacted, and so that we can plan better, and especially having that before April. Because late April, early May is when we sit down as aldermen to make our decisions on funding for the next year and what streets we're paving. And so knowing where you all plan to be working that next year helps us to say, hey, I'm going to hold off a year in doing these improvements, or I'm going to wait till after this is done, and so that we're not double doing things. Those are that's my soapbox, so thank you.
And Kent Flake is going to address some of that with us next. Alderman Ogilvie?
Hi, Mr. Fagan. Hi, Todd. How's it going?
Good.
I guess my brief questions or comments. Roughly how many years are left on the cast iron replacement program until we're finished with the city?
We think 10 plus.
10 more years?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean,
Yeah.
Okay. So I think that, I mean, I acknowledge and recognize it's a huge job that you guys are taking on, and the end result is highly beneficial to everybody, I think. So, I mean, I'm glad the work is happening. I do think there's still room for improvement in terms of street restoration, though. I think in particular, there's been a lot of, excuse me, a lot of bike infrastructure that's been kind of harmed by some of the repairs, especially when there's been like long trenches that have been, like Manchester is one example, Morgan Ford's another example, where there's now a concrete patch that runs like the entire length of the bike lane for like a mile or something. Also, paint is not always replaced. You know, there's street markings that are there, and then the work is done and the street markings are gone. It's not just bike infrastructure, it's sort of all traffic infrastructure. So my hope would be, given that there's still a lot of work left to do, is that either between Spire and the streets department, that this stuff gets restored back closer to how it looked when the work started. And it might sound like petty to talk about this stuff, but it does bother people. You know, whenever we do, like, people are happy. We live in a tough city, right? People are happy when the street gets paved. They're happy when, like, the bike lane they wanted gets built. They're happy when a crosswalk goes in that looks where there wasn't a crosswalk before. Like, these things satisfy desires that residents have, and it's very discouraging for people to see this stuff get degraded quickly, you know, by this work. So I just hope that we keep sort of striving to get the restoration to a little bit higher level, which I understand is not just you, but.
No, we're trying to do that. Last year, we did 70 miles of main, replaced it within the city. So that's a lot of work. And we are working, and the bike paths and stuff like that, the striping, that's something we really didn't think about, quite honestly. And we've been working with the street department to work them, we send the tickets to them to have them stripe that, so it is worked with the schedule of doing the other paving work that they do for us, and to where it is the same, you know, we don't have a contractor coming and doing it. So we've been working with the traffic and lighting commissioner to try to come up with a plan with that to take care of the bike paths and the emblems and stuff like that. And you're right, we can always do better, and we're looking for ways to work with the street department better to whatever we can to do the final restoration. I mean, that's our last calling call. You know, when we leave, we want to do it as nice as possible. So we're working to try to prove that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Alderwoman Rice?
All right, so one of my questions, just to kind of follow up on what Scott was just talking about on the restoration. When Spire is called to mark gas lines before construction events or even before your own construction, before digging there, are you all responsible for removing the paint back off of sidewalks and things after you've done the work?
We don't normally do that. I don't believe that is something we've been charged to go back and take those locate marks back off. No.
Okay. And then, so as far as getting the meters updated outside, moving outside of people's homes, I have a resident who approached me and they work for a landlord that has a number of rental properties, and they were seeing folks getting shut-off notices when they weren't responding quickly enough to the movement notices that the meters needed to be moved. But the workers were showing up in the middle of the day and knocking on the door and saying, well, you're not here and you're not responding, so I'm going to go ahead and shut this off now. What is the process for those who are left? How is outreach done beforehand? How many times do you attempt to get a hold of somebody before that movement work happens and then before a shut off?
Brian, do you want to? He's the expert on that.
Sure.
Typically what happens, we have what we call a crew leader that operates the job, quite frankly, and it's broken up into different segments, so they'll take one phase of the project. So he has to coordinate with all the customers that are living in that area in order to make that switch. So basically what we're doing is taking and abandoning the cast iron, installing new plastic mains, so we have to transfer all the services over to the new main. So in that process, we either have to gain access and all those different things. It's a fairly lengthy process. We call it our door tag process. So I think it's actually the fourth tag that you get is the red tag, and it gives you, I think, 72-hour notice before we shut it down. So typically what happens is we try to coordinate through the project to get those transfers completed. What happens typically is we end up with maybe 4 or 5 that are remaining on the cast iron, which will not allow us to abandon that section of main.
Okay. And are you seeing challenges from not being able, do you have to then stop that block until you get a hold of those other customers? You can't just, or you'd have to shut all 4 of those customers off in order to?
The crew leader themselves and the supervisors coordinate that effort, so we won't leave the area until we make that attempt to notify those folks.
Okay.
And really, it's just a last chance kind of attempt to get them to contact us, to reach out to us. Actually, what happens is we give the actual personal company cell phone number of all the crew leaders actually in that area.
Okay. And I had one question about the benefits program, or the programs that you have for assistance. Are you all coordinating with our senior services agencies? Are you going out with them? Because I know that they've got folks who are caseworkers who are going out and working at senior services centers that are helping folks fill out forms and things like that. Are they authorized to help fill out those forms for Spire, or do you have to do them yourself? Okay.
Yes, so we've met with the Senior Fund and then also the St. Louis Area Agency on Aging.
Okay.
So we've done training with their staff about LIHEAP energy assistance and also our Spire program. So they have the applications and the forms so that they know how to fill those out with any seniors that may come to their office, and they're always welcome to contact me if they have any questions. We also worked with St. Louis Area Agency on Aging. They have the bus pass program each month, so we participated a couple of times in November, and then also early October and then November, to kind of hit as many people right before the winter season to, again, get them to fill out the LIHEAP application if they need it, and then our Spire programs.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. And my last, just sort of not exactly the same about patching the street, but when and this is just going to be a little bit of a personal story, but my own building, the meter was replaced in front of my own building, and there was immediately a water leak because the water line comes right out where the gas line is. And so there was about a 6-month deliberation as to who was responsible for looking into that, where was that going to come from, right? And then water comes out and digs a hole in the street and says, oh, well, Spire bumped the line. So so now, well, I still have a hole. We're about a year and some change later from the movement of my meter to the outside. We still have a water leak, which we're working on. Thank you, Water Division, you're working on that. But when that happens, how long does it take to, say, reimburse the Water Division from Spire for damage done to the water pipes from Spire construction?
We work very closely with Kurt's group on that. So if it is deemed, we have damage prevention inspectors that go out there on those incidents to try to determine what was happened, what was fault, who did what. And we bill within a month, and then the water company there too. If it's deemed that we were responsible, normally we wait, we get the bill, they get it to us a month, goes to our claims department, and we process for payment.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's all. Thanks so much.
Any follow-up? Thank you all for being here and for your time. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Kent Flake, you are up.
Well, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. There has been a little talk about our new street restoration policy. For 1,100 miles of streets, 700 miles of alley, 2,000 miles of sidewalk, a bunch of pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, and other amenities out there. Long story short is currently about the only real rules we have are found in Chapter 20 of the Municipal Code or on the back of a permit application. Not many people read those. Not many people pay attention to those. And most of the utilities and water company and those guys, they do, in general, pay attention to those. Mom and pop plumbing company, they do it the same way they've been doing it for the last 50 years, and it was good enough then, so it's probably good enough now. So essentially, all we're trying to do is essentially elaborate on existing guidelines and actually put real wording or real words with our shorthand that's on the back of the permit. Pretty much everything that's came up, every concern I've heard mentioned here this evening is already on the back of our permits. And it says you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. But it's about 5 words that says you have to do this. So we're just expanding on that. I mean, our goal at the end of the day is to be able to hand out a guidebook to any contractor, whether they are familiar with the city or not. They might be coming in and doing a private building or private development, or whoever it might happen to be, and say, here, this is our real rule book, so we're all on the same page at the end of the day. A lot of people come to the city, we've probably all heard this, that whether it be the streets or building or whatever, we just don't know what to do. We're not from here, we're from Indianapolis, we came over here to build this building. Can somebody point us in the right direction? And we've all probably heard the same thing. I called this person, they told me to call this person, told me to call this person. 35 people later, they're talking to me, and I'm trying to get them some answers. We're not going to have all the right answers the first time once this new policies and procedures come out. I did borrow from a fairly significant city around here, and I think they probably ran into many problems that we have, and I'm sure they have a lot more staff in order to put a procedures manual together. So they have probably ran through most of everything that we could ever think about finding. So the goal would be to have a living document at the end of the day that every day I see something new pop up. I've been doing this job for 10 years, I've been in the city for 18, and every day I see something new. The goal would be to put those nuances actually on a piece of paper, so in 5 years when it comes up again, we have the answer. We don't have to make up the answer, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, we just have the answer. The goal essentially is to minimize conflicts. You know, we had a cave-in over here off 6th Street about 2 years ago in the middle of winter. Car fell in the middle of it. Well, we had 3 or 4 utilities involved, and nobody could decide who was going to start first, who was going to go second, what we had to do in order to secure the hole. And, well, honestly, there was water running into the hole, and there's electric running through the hole. So pretty sure we don't want anything to do with that hole until the electric gets shut off, because the electric downtown, it's no joke. So that's something, there needs to be a plan for that. Other major cities have a plan. We're going to use their plan. We're going to modify it probably and make it work. Currently, if you want to find a rule about streets, you're probably not going to find it. So this will be a searchable PDF or maybe even a Word document, depending on who you are. So it's actually searchable. Our Muni code is searchable. That's about the only, unless it's either in the Muni code or on our website. If it's not on one of those, you're probably not going to find that rule. It's going to be really hard to find. I mean, the goal at the end of the day is for all of us to save money. Utilities want to save money. The city wants to save money. The utilities, as much as we don't want them to tear up our streets, they don't want me to pave it a week before they plan on going there, because they had all this engineering done in order to do that. And now I'm going to tell them there's no way you're going to dig in that street for at least a couple of years so we don't all look like idiots. Because I don't look like looking like an idiot. It's not something I enjoy. And if we all do that, then we have a long-lasting infrastructure. If we kind of get the plan together, this is what we're going to pave in 2 years. If you want to come dig a hole in it, come dig it now. That's what we're not doing now. We all sit down in April. Usually by the time I get out of my first capital meeting, we're putting asphalt on the street that day somewhere. As soon as I get a commitment from Alderman, we go pave it. Because that's how we work in St. Louis. Some would agree with that, and some probably won't agree with that. But there needs to be a little more thought and a little more plan put in on that side. And maybe when we sit down in April, we don't plan on what we're going to pave in April 2019. Maybe we plan on what we're going to pave in April 2020. So at least then I can talk to utilities and talk to other people and say, hey, this is where we're going to be. I'm giving you 12, 14, 16 months to get out there and get in front of us. So then they don't have to tear up our streets. They're still going to have emergencies. They're still going to have tap destroys to do. They're going to have other things to do. But the goal is at least to let the big utilities know for anything they have planned, get it done today so we don't have to worry about this whole blame game in a year. And the other big thing that's part of the policy, but it's something we've really been putting together here over the last 6 months, is, I guess, increased communication between our stakeholders. I consider utilities, some of the major contractors, very few of the major contractors, but some of the ones that work downtown, and they're always downtown, they're always putting up a building, they're always doing this. Those are our major stakeholders. And we've really increased over probably the last 6 months to a year our communication between everybody. And that's the biggest thing. This doesn't work without that. And we all got to be on the same page. And if we can increase that communication, it's like the plan that Megan brought up earlier, that I don't know where gas is going. Well, when we sit down in April, I always take your guys' list. I go back and look at my gas map to see, all right, this is in the area, this is in the area. Oh, these 5 streets are good. I think I actually told 2 or 3 aldermen this last year, I can't pave anything in your entire ward because they had it blocked off for construction. And I called over to Todd Fagan with Spire. He says, we haven't started that yet. We're getting ready to. You probably don't want to do anything near there. And that's an entire ward, which is good to hear sometimes. I can't spend money this year because Spire's going to come tear every street in the ward up. So I can save that money or use that money for something else. But so we do have that plan. The sinking utility cuts, if it's Spire, those are pretty easy. If it's somebody else, they're a lot harder. I need to know about those. You can put them in through CSB, but if you guys are aware of them, please get those to me. Spires are easy because they have probably the best tracking system I've ever seen in my entire life. If I call them up and say, I'm in front of this house, it looks like you guys were here in the last 3 months, they'll look it up. Within 5 minutes, they'll tell me who was there, what they did, exactly where the hole's at, 3 feet off the curb, it's this size, it's this, this, and this. And they'll start investigating. And they kind of put little check marks on their employees. You know, if they get 5 complaints from this crew, then I don't know what they do with those people, but I probably don't want to know. Traffic infrastructure, that is all over the new plan. It's most of our permit conditions were updated about 2012, 2014, just to update them slightly, just to clean them up, to get rid of some old stuff from the 50s and 60s. That is all over this plan, though, as far as pedestrian infrastructure and all the amenities that go along with ease of access and pedestrian movements. That's my short version of the new policy.
What's the ETA on having something ready, and will Alderman have an opportunity to weigh in on it?
I'm going to say that we're probably about 50% now. Well, let's say 50% of creation. I expect there to be many, many, many arguments over this policy. Because the other thing that I kind of left out, because I'm trying to keep this nice and clean, is a moratorium on paving. Which means once you guys pave it, if we give people a heads up and say we're going to pave this in a year, then nobody can touch that street again for 3, 4, 5 years. If it's an emergency and you had a water main break, obviously that's excluded. Looking at Chicago, Indy, and a couple other towns, the problem, they have a lot of exclusions. A lot of exclusions. I'm putting in a new building, it's excluded. I mean, who's to say that anything that gas or Ameren ever does is an emergency?
Who's defining the emergency?
Yeah, and that's kind of the problem with that. Because if I'm mandated, then I got to get all this cast iron out of the ground, and I say, well, you can't work in this area, I'm going to come back and say, well, it could be an emergency, because it's really important I get this cast iron out of the ground, get the system updated, or we could have a problem. So that's the problem with what I've seen on the paving moratorium, is that it almost brings more problems than good. I think if everybody was on the same page to start with, and we all kind of cared about each other as far as utilities and city and major contractors, we probably wouldn't have any problems at all without the moratorium.
Okay, so you're 50% done. When do you think you might have something for folks to review?
I would guess somewhere between the 1st of January and the middle of January.
Okay. And will Alderman have an opportunity to weigh in?
I would hope so, yes.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, yes.
Okay. Alderwoman Tyus?
We can weigh in, because this is just his policy, but we make the law. So that's the real answer. He just asking us, would we go along with that?
Yep.
Isn't that correct?
Well, and I'm also going to need you guys.
I know.
For many updates to the ordinances.
I know.
Most of them are close, but I'm going to need some help.
I know.
So I hope we're all on the same team.
I understand, but she just asked, do we get to weigh in? We're the final weigh in, is what I'm telling her. He's just giving his dream list, okay? So I don't have a problem. Paving is sexy if you want to hurry up and make everything look good, but it's a waste of money when you pave every couple of years. I think that's ridiculous.
Yep.
Anyway, but when we have these utilities and things come in, I thought that the rule was that they were supposed to patch to a method that was as close to possible as to what it was before, and I don't find that a lot of times. Someone here talked about, I think it was the Alderman from the 15th, that they build up and then it sinks down, and so it's never quite the way it was. But I thought originally it was supposed to be, if it was concrete, they had to put concrete back, or they had to put a concrete base, and then they had to put the blacktop. And so you didn't have a perfect street, but you had a pretty nice street. I find the new repairs not to be nearly as good as they used to be, and especially when you have to come and put the what are the pothole, not, what are the things called, the manholes and things like that. They used to have to come back and bring that up to surface, and something has happened in the 20-something years that, when I first got down here. What is that?
Manholes are a giant headache. I'll go to those second. Our restoration policy with all utilities and all contractors is if it's concrete, it's a concrete street, it should be restored to grade with concrete. If it's an asphalt street, it should be left down 2 inches from grade with concrete. And then they send an asphalt ticket to city streets, and then we patch it those 2 inches. And we seal it, and then we patch those 2 inches.
What is this?
There's a rally for trans rights.
Oh, okay.
So, I think I hit most everything on it. And
And
bricks,
so wait, let me stop here. So then they do the first original concrete, and then we do the final asphalt, is that what you're saying?
we do the top 2 inches asphalt.
Okay.
Yes. And if this came up earlier before this meeting, if it's a brick street, it should go back as brick. If it's a cobblestone street, it should go back as cobblestone. If it's concrete, it should go back as concrete. The only ones that's not that way is asphalt. From what I've learned throughout my life is that I don't want a concrete guy doing asphalt work. I don't want an asphalt guy doing concrete work, which is pretty simple. Manholes. I could probably talk for the next 3 hours about those, but I'll try to keep this short. As you've heard from Scobie, Spire, MSD, anybody else can tell you the same thing. Their infrastructure is aging. Typically, when their lids start sinking, it's not because we keep bringing asphalt up. Their structures tend to start having issues, and they start sinking. Really depends on where you're at, on whether this is true or not, but that's typically what happens. And then, in order to get them out, that's a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 job because they got to replace the whole structure. They don't really want to do that very often. The other issue, like downtown, very few people take consideration of the other utilities around them when they install their own utilities. So what you end up with is one utility here, another utility here that's 5 feet away, and then 5 more feet, you got a utility here. So then, in order to pave that, you got this. Or you have some that are just completely out of whack, and when we pave them, which you've probably seen on Broadway or 4th Street, when we pave them, they're so far off grade, we just pave over the top of them. And about 10 minutes later, it seems like, they come out and jackhammer them right back out. We contact them, say, hey, it'd be really nice if you guys would raise that up 6 inches so it's actually at street grade. They've got better about that. They're not good about it. Depends on which utility it is. Typically, it ends up being telecom. In telecom, it's very hard to point or figure out exactly who's claiming that telecom manhole, since there's 3 or 4 different telecoms going through that manhole. So yeah, it's a fight, definitely with telecom. Water, sewer, easy. Spires, you don't see too much in the street. Ameren just put a whole bunch of really nice new ones in downtown. Most of those are right at grade. Most of the ones you see in residential St. Louis, though, are usually water and sewer. We actually have risers for those too. We can actually raise those. If they're 2, 3, 4, 5 inches low, we can raise those up. In another 6 months or a year, if the structure's really going bad, it's going to be sunk again, though.
Do they have to be permitted for manholes? Are manholes permitted, or are they allowed by right-of-way to just put them in where they want to?
They have to get a permit to install them. I don't think they actually have to have a permit for anything else other than the actual construction of them.
And so I want to ask about this permitting for a minute. I don't know, maybe a year or so ago, somebody was working on Kings Highway, and I live a house from Kings Highway. And when they put the temporary cover down, boom, 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 boom. Okay, and I called Mike Holsey, which I've been done for years, and he didn't know who put it there. And he had to spend time trying to find out, like a couple of days. So how does that happen? Explain that to me.
I can't remember.
No permit, obviously. Okay.
I can't remember who that was. I will say that's addressed in the new policy, because every one of them will essentially, every plate that's put down, well, first of all, there's a bunch of, even in our current permit conditions, there's a bunch of things they're supposed to do. A lot of people don't do them. Some city entities are probably the worst offenders of that. They will be able to see there, like I said, our current conditions have that in there already. The new policy will actually be much more extravagant on that. It will include placing like just a plain white bumper sticker on there and Sharpie, city water, clean gas with a name and a good number.
Okay.
If they're not on there, I'm going to take the plate and fill in the hole.
And are you having a city councilor, someone working with you as you write this policy?
Not yet.
Okay, but you will have somebody that will be
Yes.
doing that, working with you?
Yes.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Alderwoman Green?
Keep it short, just, I guess the one request I have as you're putting together this policy or this proposal to bring in front of us is like a long-term plan for street paving. I personally think it's ridiculous that aldermen even weigh in on this. There should be some kind of citywide plan of this is the last time this street was paved, and it's just an automatic ongoing basis depending upon the traffic volume of that street and all of that, rather than us. Because what ends up happening, what I notice happening is when one street gets paved and another doesn't, residents look to us and they say, well, there must be somebody that the alderman likes on that block, and that's the reason that it got paved. And being able to point to a citywide policy that says, hey, this is the last time that this street was paved, and this is the rotation, and anybody can go on the city website and see these are all the streets that are planned to be paved this next year, and, you know, out into the future. That is my, hopefully not too pie in the sky request that I would just really like to see.
I like that plan, and that's the direction I'm kind of sort of working on.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Ogilvie?
Thank you. Yeah, I concur. I mean, I hear people on both sides sort of saying that same thing. I think a number of aldermen think we should go in that direction, and I think the streets department thinks we should go in that direction. You know, so I hope we keep talking about that. It's probably not going to all happen at once, but if we could take some baby steps to doing that, I think that would be valuable, especially for arterial streets. You know, that's maybe something easier to wrap our head around to get a sense of pavement quality and when the last time it was paved and the needs. But I'm glad to hear you're working on a more elaborate policy. I mean, you know, this is, a lot of this stuff is messy, you know, stuff breaks and people have to go fix it. And most of it gets fixed, which is good. But there is this, I have just seen some dangerous conditions left sometimes sometimes by our own utilities. I've seen dangerous conditions left by the water department. I've seen dangerous conditions left by Spire at one point or another. And, you know, and sometimes the big challenge is I don't even know. If I see something dangerous, I don't even know who did it all the time. And I assume you wouldn't know right away either. So giving everybody like a more clear set of guidelines on, especially after it gets fixed. You know, we're good at, if there's a water break, we're good at going and stopping the water break, but we're not, I mean, I've seen spots in the city where we just leave a patch of gravel where the sidewalk used to be, or a plate in the road for a month. We're not good at actually repairing it. So that's the kind of stuff it sounds like you're working on, which I'm glad to hear.
Yeah, we've been working on it for a long time. Like you said, it's baby steps, and I really think that's what it's all about, you know. And it's about people reporting problems. A lot of people gave up on the city a long time ago. You know, it's not going to call the city about that street light because it'll take them 3 years to get out there and replace that street light. It's as far as reporting it, getting the information to us. I mean, I find a missing sidewalk slab almost every day, and it's growing grass. I mean, growing lots of grass. So it's not something from a month ago. It's something, I'm not even sure it was from this year. You know, and the problem is nobody reported it. And I mean, like I said earlier, I got 1,100 miles of street, 700 miles of alley, and that adds up to almost 2,000 miles of sidewalk. Not putting all the onus on homeowners and residents, but if you're missing a sidewalk, let me know. And like I said, and the goal is to get to a point where we can have a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan and not exclude Alderman on that. Not just say this is what I'm doing no matter what, and forget the board, forget whoever. I mean, because we all have neighborhoods that are important to us, that we see up and coming, that we know need some help, you know. I mean, I have paving information. That's one of the first things I did when I started with the city was put together a pavement management database. And every street we ever paved, what time or when it was paved, dimensions, whether it's on a snow route, bus route, et cetera, because we never had that till 2002, 2001, 2002. Now we have that. About every 3-4 years, I have a guy or two go out and reevaluate and give everyone a new rating on a scale of 1 through 10. Typically, it's real easy. Over 4 years, it's going to lose a point. So if it was an 8, which is pretty good, in 2014, it's probably going to be a 6 or a 7 4 years later. It's pretty true unless something crazy happened. There might have been a water main break. There might have been a whole bunch of water main breaks. There could have been a sewer collapse. There could have been this. And that's why you actually have to go physically reevaluate them every 4 years. So we kind of have the tools. We're actually currently going through that rating process right now. We're probably 4 wards in out of 28. We just started about 3 weeks ago. So we have all the information kind of at our fingertips. We just got to figure out what we want to do with it. And we got to figure out a way to actually use it and make it useful to all of us. So we can actually have a paving plan. You know, I mean, it's kind of silly to be sitting there in April saying, what are we going to pave next week? Which is kind of what we do. And with that being said, usually in April I have maybe a 30, 40 street paving list because a lot of people don't really know what they want to pave. Probably because a lot of aldermen don't necessarily, I'm not going to say they don't care, but the last thing they're concerned about in April is what streets am I going to pave? And, you know, then September, October, I start getting phone calls. Can you pave this? Can you pave this? Can you pave this? It would alleviate, I think, a lot of headaches from all of us if we can figure out how to make an actual plan out of this.
Great. I guess the last thing I'll say, related to Spire, since if we have another decade of cast iron replacements to still do, I know I've seen the map where people are working. I don't think the public has generally seen that. It might, and I know it's complicated because you work in an area and then you got to leave to work in another area and then you come back and it's all about, you know, who's on what main and what service is set up for that main at that point. But trying to put that map somewhere where people have a sense of like what the time frame is on these things, I think would be valuable. Sure, come on up. Sure.
What we're trying to do now with our new website.
Can you come up so you're on the microphone?
But what we are trying to do is with our website to have that on where you can go and type in an address where you're at or where we're working in an area to better communicate that. So we're working with our corporate communications department to have the information that we know we're going to be working in the next 3, 6, 9 months to have that out there to do exactly what you're talking about. So that's in the works.
Great, thank you.
Sorry.
That's all, thanks.
Alderwoman Rice?
I I'm actually very hopeful to hear you talk about all of those things, about the rating system and plans for all of these things. So thank you for all of that that we don't get to see. I'm glad that is all happening. And I'm in agreement that I think it is more beneficial to the city as a whole to have a plan for paving as we go forward instead of just piecemeal by ward, right? And our ward boundaries are arbitrary when it comes to the streets, right? And I have all of the Shaw neighborhood but one block, and I'm not responsible for paving that one block, right? But it makes no sense to pave the blocks surrounding that one and not that one. So yes. Just seconding that I would love to see that. So thank you for doing that work. Also, just sort of a request as you're going through this process as well to one of my questions earlier about removing markings from the utility markings from the sidewalks and streets. Once those things are done, if we could try to include that in the plan, that would be great. We have a lot of business districts that are particularly bothered by it, but then also homeowners don't want to see, orange spray paint or blue spray paint on their sidewalks for years. So if that's a part of the process, that would be great as far as restoration there. And one question for folks who are digging into the streets for residential projects, for smaller developments and that kind of thing, I had a situation arise, and forgive me if this is just because I'm new, but a situation arise where a hole was dug into the street and a board barely covering the edges of the hole was placed over for a night, over the sidewalk and in the street, right? There are regulations as far as how much of the street that they can leave open and how covered those things have to be, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And so it's
2 feet on each side. If it was a piece of plywood covering a sidewalk, we don't have a real specification on the street unless it's in a drive lane. If it's in a drive lane, it must have a steel plate. If it's in a parking lane, it should be, if they're going to use plywood or something like that, it should be barricaded off, and they still should have 2 feet covering past all edges.
Okay. Is there, who do we call if, so in this situation, a neighbor came home and said, why is there, why can't I can barely get through my street and there's giant holes that like my dog could fall into, or my small child could fall into. What's the process for following up on those things?
In the short term or long term?
Short term, sort of more emergency situation. We call someone and have somebody come out and take a look at that. And I don't keep plywood boards in my basement to cover those things up. Or if that would help, I would if I could. But yes, so short term and then sort of long term to say, hey, keep an eye on this developer when they keep applying for permits. Make sure that they're following up.
Yeah, we get that all the time. And I really don't like it whenever I get to about 10 o'clock at night that somebody left a hole completely wide open, because there's a lot of things I'd rather be doing at 10 o'clock at night other than going to look at a hole. But yes, most of those, if you feel there's an immediate danger, I'd either call or email me. I'll either get an inspector out there, or I'll at least be aware of it for first thing in the morning. If it's an entire sidewalk open with a 12-foot deep hole and there's nothing blockading it, definitely call me, and we'll get somebody out there. I've got a couple on-call guys anyway. Don't mind going out for that kind of stuff, and they keep boards or whatever else they might need in there. If nothing else, they'll have half dozen barricades and some caution tape to put up around there, which isn't going to save many things, but at least it says, hey, there's a hole on the other side of this.
Sure.
And at the end of the day, we'll hold the contractor liable for that. And we'll probably hold that against him later also, as far as permitting. Because once we see somebody start having issues like that, we kind of slow down their permit process. And we also usually have inspectors kind of watching over them way more often than maybe the next contractor that actually does good work.
Okay.
The goal at the end of the day is we don't want those kind of contractors out there.
Right.
And Per Chapter 20, it's a very long process. And hopefully with this new policy, we can shorten that process up, or at least make it where we have some teeth. Currently, we don't really have any teeth as far as any fines, penalties, fees, et cetera, with the current code. I would like to see it get changed a little bit, reasonably changed, so we actually have some teeth on those guys. I mean, if I got to bring somebody at 10 o'clock at night to correct their issues, I have a problem with that. We should be reimbursed for that, and we should be able to hold them accountable in the future for those continued mistakes.
Sure. Okay. And I actually just thought of one more question. I'm sorry, everybody's getting ready to go. Is there our traffic planning, bike infrastructure, do we have positions that encompass those that work under your department or work with your department as far as, there's developments, there's utilities, there's bike infrastructure, there's those kinds of things that all sort of need coordinating when we're looking at paving and streets and the intersection of all of those. Are you sort of the head of coordinating all of that, or are those closely connected enough that they can coordinate?
That would be typically my boss, Jamie Wilson, Director of Streets. Our traffic commissioner is often involved in a lot of those conversations. Also, we have a great street coordinator who started 3-4 months ago, and he's also been playing a very large part into those. I try to stay away from those as much as possible, but they keep me well informed on things I need to be informed on.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
So I actually was here before we used to get this lump sum of money. When I first got here, we got $70,000. And so we didn't have all these problems with paving the streets because we didn't have money to do that. And then in 93, Freeman came, 91, 93. Then he passed the taxes, and then we got a lot more money. And then while I was gone, Slay stole half of the money, and then Lyda put $50 back, and people think we got more, but we used to get a lot more money. But when I talk about the streets, and I hear the streets, and I pretty much know, because I represent most of the area that was mine in the first place, I know where my streets, but what I don't hear is a plan for curbs. I replaced all of Euclid years ago. Having all these paved streets and no curbs is totally ridiculous. And I've been saving up my money because I'm getting ready to put curbing down, because it's very unsafe. And on Kings Highway, which they don't know anything about, but when I first came here, I stood up every day, every week until I got North Kings Highway paved. It was my pledge when I came down here, and it did it happened. But we still don't have, and Freeman then put curbs on the median. We have no curbs on the sidewalk. So I never understood. I'd rather you had put the curbs on the sidewalk and not the median, because nobody walks in the median. So we've had 3 or 4 people get killed with the racing, and the cars have jumped the curbs. And I hope that someplace, and I know street paving is everybody's sexy things, but curb is a public safety thing that I hope that is part of the plans too, because most of our curbing is terrible. So is there some part in your plan that we will address curbing? No.
No, I may put something in there, but
because you never, even when you have these meetings, anybody said you need to put curbs, but I know where I need to put all of my curbs, and I just don't understand why that's not part of the plan.
curbing is a different animal. A lot of people claim that city streets just keeps paving and paving and paving. It's what lifting the street up 6 inches. That's why there's no curb. Well, I will tell you that every time I pave a street, I mill down as far as I can.
I know.
Until I either hit concrete, cobblestone, or brick. Once I hit one of those 3 things, I stop going down.
Right.
And you'll see it if you actually, whenever I'm milling a street in your ward, you'll actually see that pieces of brick or pieces of cobble or pieces of concrete are actually popping through. Depends on the neighborhood, but I really think, and curbs vary neighborhood. It really depends on what neighborhood you're in. Some wards, you got 6, 7, 8 inch curbs that are really old.
They're newer.
And you also have some, it goes both ways. And I'm not sure why they sink. I know they're really heavy, so maybe that's most of the reason. And then the problem is, once they get short, people park on top of them. So you already have a 1 inch curb that's sunk 4 or 5 inches over the last 50 years. Well, me driving my truck over the top of it every day isn't going to make it any taller.
Right.
So it's not addressed in there, but I will think about figuring out a way to put something to do with curbs in there.
Well, I do know that you pave that, you go down, but what happens is some curbs wear out, okay? I have mostly granite curbs. I have an older part of the city. So some of them you can lift the granite curbs up, and that's what I want to do, a combination of lifting up. But some of them, they're just gone. They've washed away over a long, long time, and you need to replace them. And we don't just put curbs there to look cute. It's a public safety thing that we need. And so for me, I would love, paving streets, and especially paving alleys, that's a whole nother thing that is ridiculous. That blacktop in the alleys, we know better than that. And I was so shocked when I came back here and we were doing that, because we already know what happens in the long term. And that, again, is a political thing that we did, not a public safety thing. And then when you blacktop those alleys, then people who screamed about them then said, oh, now I need speed bumps, because people start flying through the alleys. And that's my last question, because I'll get with you about my curbs. With these new speed humps that we're putting in, will that affect your paving in any way? And if so, how?
I believe it will. I've seen about 3 different style of speed humps so far. I'm not the speed hump guru. Those typically get installed by BPS. I have seen some of them, the asphalt ones that taper down to pretty much nothing at the curb. I think I can repave those without any issue. The ones that are bigger and they tend to extend almost all the way to the curb at a fairly significant height, those are probably going to be a problem.
And how will you have to remove them to pave? Will you pave up to them? What will be the solution?
The ones that taper down currently, I can just run my miller right over the top of them. What it does, it mills the exact same, close to the exact same as what's there. So if it comes up gradually and comes back down, that's what my miller's going to do. And actually, the ones that are more significant going to the curb probably aren't a huge deal, but they're going to be kind of a headache, because I'm going to have to do some handwork along the curb in order to get the water to flow down the street.
It'll cost more expense?
I think it's still going to be fairly doable, but we haven't really crossed that bridge yet. That's why most of these I have been telling everybody I can that we probably, if it's a street that's in fairly or somewhat disrepair, we need to pave it first. So at least we should have 12, 15, 16 years before we have to think about it, hopefully.
I have no further questions. Okay.
Thanks for your time, Ken.
Yep,
Really
thank you.
appreciate it. Yep, we're adjourned.